look, and I say this with no like personal sympathy for Kyle Rittenhouse, except for that I do think, if I'm going to be an abolitionist, I can and care about the fact that we're like one of the only countries that hasn't signed on to the Universal Declaration of the Rights of the Child because we regularly lock up and like murder underage people. Like I care about that. But the Rosenbaum altercation, the first shooting, was Kyle fleeing Rosenbaum, the chase through the parking lot, and the gunshots that were kind of happened off stage, off screen. So the part that we saw, one could, I think, conceivably argue that he was retreating. Now, whether or not, and I guess the question would be, did he use proportionate force in response to whatever Rosenbaum was going to do when he caught him?
Yeah, it's still not, that's my thing. I'm not, whether or not, he doesn't have to be the initial aggressor in that situation. Like Rosenbaum can be the aggressor in terms of, or initiate this interaction, and it could still not be self-defense. I would concede to the fact that Rosenbaum, is engaged in this altercation with him and he's running, but nevertheless, it still doesn't make it self-defense to shoot him. Even if, he's chasing you, he doesn't have a weapon, he's unarmed, it still doesn't make it self-defense to shoot him. But even if I conceded that, I would still think they would have Huber. I think they cannot get around, that killing Anthony Huber was self-defense. I don't think they can get around that one.
Yeah. Or, even potentially the subsequent shots at Rosenbaum after the first one.
Right. 3 shots. One of which is in the back.
Do we know do forensics tell us what the first shot was and what the likely impact of that shot would have been? Like, was the first one enough to have stopped him?
So the first... Let me see. I don't know if they tell the order. Just that one gunshot is in the groin that fractured his pelvis, and another to the back, which perforated his right lung and liver, and another to the left hand, which was a superficial shot. Oh, he shot him 4. Yeah, he did shoot at him 4 times, and a wound to the right side of his forehead.
Jesus, this is
right. All right, is it sounding self-defense to y'all?
I mean, it's just so gruesome.
Just think about that. An unarmed kid, you have an AR-15, you shoot him in the groin, so he fractured his pelvis. So likelihood he immediately falls. That much is not debated. They know that Rosenbaum falls. He falls forward to the ground, at which point he falls towards him. He's still unarmed. He's fractured. He shoots him 3 more times. Like he shoots him 3 more times. Where's the self-defense, bro?
Yeah, what I keep thinking about is this idea that, okay, obviously don't bring the gun to the knife fight.
Yes.
Don't bring the gun to the gunfight. Like, just don't bring a gun. Gun's not a big fan. However, there is a part of me that is, I'm not saying legally sympathetic or morally sympathetic, but in terms of like just putting myself in the position of a person who has already made all those bad choices.
Yeah.
Understanding of why you wouldn't want your gun to come in possession of someone like Rosenbaum. Right.
But that's if you at all believe that, like, you have to first credit his narrative that that's what he was trying to stop him from doing. And
well, sure. But just looking at videos of Rosenbaum, Rosenbaum 100% did not deserve to die. Just because you're being erratic.
Yeah.
And mentally ill does not mean you deserve to get shot. And that's why you should just keep guns away from people.
Yeah.
However, now that he's in this situation, like, I'm sympathetic to the idea that if I were rolling around on the ground, this isn't what happened. I'm not saying they were rolling around on the ground, but if I were in some altercation with someone that was behaving the way that Rosenbaum did, I don't think it's necessarily incredible to think, I don't know, because he's so erratic, I don't know what he's going to do if he gets this gun out of my hands. Do you know what I mean? And that's, I think, where the jury's mind and the self-defense arguments are going to start coming in.
Oh, yeah. And God forbid he shoot innocent people at this protest, right? So why not shoot them myself?
I mean, like, this is why, to me, it all comes back to, you should not have put yourself in this situation. Like, you should not have brought the gun in the situation.
In order to believe this, Briahna, we're approaching it as though as people who would care about other people. Like, we're approaching that as though these are his real feelings. Let's keep it G real. We've all seen on social media, Kyle Rittenhouse don't give a damn about these protesters. He don't like them. He's not for them. He heard a black man was shot 14 times in the back, and his concern became about buildings he's never been to, shops he don't shop at, people he don't know. He doesn't give a damn about the protesters. He had a medical back. He wasn't there to help them. So it's not like he did this looking out for them.
I didn't mean that he was worried that the gun was going to be used on innocent.
On himself.
Think the gun on himself. Like that Rosenbaum would take it and kill Kyle.
Listen, an AR-15 strapped to you and you've already shot, it would be, if he shot once, if he shot him in the pelvis like he did, that we would be having a different conversation about self-defense. Maybe he stopped him to stop him, you know what I mean? To wound him or whatever. But he didn't. He shot him in the pelvis. He was down. He fell to the ground. He shot him 3 more times and killed him.
And then he gets up and he's panicked. And we see him running from the Rosenbaum killing. And then people identifying him. And there is a frenzy. There is like a chorus of shouting and like, that's the guy who did it. That's the guy who shot him. And this is where a lot of conservatives are saying, yes, he was being chased by a quote unquote mob. I mean, it's people who are doing what I think a lot of conservatives argue should be done, is to pursue an active shooter, and we're supposed to like take them down, right? Like we're all supposed to be heroes that take down active shooters if it's in a school or any of these other scenarios. Suddenly, because of who this person was shooting, what his politics were, he's been transformed from the active shooter to the hero by some parts of the country. But however you want to characterize it, there was now, and he is now being chased by people who want to disarm him.
Yeah.
And so again,
100%.
we're back to this reasonable person thing where from our perspective, they want to disarm him because he just killed somebody and he's dangerous. And from conservatives' perspective, they want to disarm him because they are violent and they want to take his gun and maybe do him physical harm.
Yeah.
And that's why, I mean, this just feels like such a loser. Like, this just feels like a lose-lose. Because none of this is about Kyle Rittenhouse or anything that happened there that day, which I think reasonable minds could agree, like, this is not a situation that should have happened. But it's just, it's just a mirror to our bigger political reality.
I think you're right, and I agree with that. I just think the important part about the Rittenhouse case for me in terms of that is that Rittenhouse himself is not divorced from that political reality. Rittenhouse was driven out there based on that. It's his own endorsement of Blue Lives Matter that sent him to the protest in the first place, and I'm not making it up. That's his own social media. That's his own public words and his own philosophy. So, you know, it would be easier if we were framing this as like, this is a 17-year-old who was caught up. You know, he did something, you know, blah 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 blah, and it was outside of all of these different things. And we, just as the public, as the media, as the narrative, or what's happening in the country, just put this spin on it, that would be different. But that isn't the case. Rittenhouse himself, by every admission, very much so sees him as somebody aspiring to be the police. And in this case, this protest here, what happened is the police shot somebody 4 times in the back. So he showed up with a gun, acting like security for what he deemed as the most important, you know, entity there, and that's businesses and stores or whatever it is. And he did not show the same regard he showed for properties. He didn't show that to the people. So, you know, I would have sympathy, like, you know, such is life. It's unfortunate for his mother. You know, that's her kid. You know, I don't really have it. I'm not going to hold you. I don't really have the sympathy. It's not in my spirit for him. But I would hear it on the age. I would hear it on age. If we were just making that argument, he's a 17-year-old kid, sending him to prison, you know, won't change anything and yada, yada, yada. It won't make him better. It won't, you know, deal with the situations that lead to this. That would be a different conversation.
Yeah, like I said, I watched the Orfila video and I was appreciative of it, if only because it really helps you understand the perspective of half the country. Like it helps you, because I think so many times the left or the broad left liberals can sit around thinking like Republicans are just in a different world. Like they're insane. Like they just don't care. They don't have respect for human life. And there's this monstrous portrait. And while my emotionality is still kind of there, like I just don't understand how you could be inclined to believe that version of events. When you see what they see, you see that it's not like a full-on delusion. It's just a selective perception of facts. And it's not that those facts aren't real. Like the clips that Orfila is marshaling in that video aren't wrong. They're not made up. They're not distorted. Right? But it is, you know, in the same way that I was kind of having this conversation with Andrew Sullivan about how you can... Did you guys have to read that case in tort law about the little like Irish girl who gets vaccinated and has like a bad reaction to it?
Oh, I don't know that case.
Okay, it doesn't matter. Like that you can like read that you can read case law one way or the other, just deciding depending on who your sympathies are and like who you think had a responsibility to mitigate the harm. Who, you know, a progressive would say, a leftist would say, we should structure the law so that the person who has the most power and ability to control a situation has the responsibility, assumes the risk, the onus is on them to make sure people are protected.
Yeah.
Right. When we talk about tort law and how we attach liability, we say if you're doing something super, super dangerous, if you're transporting toxic chemicals, then, and there's an accident, contributory negligence, all that goes out the window. I don't care if the train tracks are broken. You chose to transport toxic waste. We can't make people judge. We can't have a judgment-proof situation because you decided to blame the chipmunk that crossed the tracks. You got to assume the risk because you're doing very risky behavior, right? We have strict liability, strict liability. And in this situation, it's not legally satisfactory in the court in the context of this criminal case. But there are so many people, like the focus on the mother, the focus on who drove him there, the focus on who bought the gun. I think it's driven in part by, I think, everybody on both sides, knee-jerk reaction to say, like, it never should have come down to a 17-year-old being in this situation. Mm-hmm. And I wonder, Olay, does it raise, if this precedent gets set, I mean, does it raise any questions or concerns for you about how people who are protesters should or should not conduct themselves?
This is a dangerous case, right? I think for a significant amount of reasons, right? We had a lot of protests last summer. You know, as of last summer, Black Lives Matter became the largest civil rights movement in our country, right? There are protests every single day, and they're going to continue to be protests like that. And I think setting a precedent where, regardless of how you feel about it, there were people killed at a protest. There is a kid who killed people, and he is very much so a part of and associated with the movement that opposes all of those philosophical beliefs or political beliefs that the people at the protest were espousing. So if that is allowed to happen, that someone could go to that protest and kill 3 people and they get off, that does set a dangerous, I do mean literally puts people in danger in terms of attending protests, because there's always a danger in going to protests. You know, there's always that something could happen if somebody goes there. But I do think it is dangerous. And I agree with you. I understand that this case has taken on a larger life and meaning for those reasons. But I don't think it's as complicated as we think it is, because I ask myself it like this. If I were in law school, and you could ask yourself the same thing, Briahna, and it was your final exam, and you had the fact pattern, you know what I mean? And you had to deploy self-defense based on the legal standard of it, a reasonable person in the circumstances. Would you argue, and you get to choose, would you argue that it's self-defense or no? How would you come out on this? Would you find this completely divorced from this never happened in real life? This was just a fact pattern, person,
and there were no politics
unarmed, no politics. This is just a fact pattern you were reading. Reasonable person standard, do you think is self-defense?
Even if there's no politics attached to people, the fact pattern remains. It remains true that somebody brought the gun to the fight.
Yes.
And it's really hard for me. I mean, I think that would provoke me to be disinclined to argue it's self-defense.
And there you go.
I am struggling with that a little because I will admit that I was a little surprised in the Orfila video to see how many people really were there armed. And it raises this question, like, so now is the standard that, if one of those armed Black Lives Matter protesters had been beset upon, am I going to feel differently? I'm really trying to challenge myself. Am I going to feel differently if they defend themselves? Am I now saying, like, I just don't think anybody should bring, I mean, those people came to the protest armed to defend folks.
Well, here's my thing. I don't think anybody should be going to protest to be reactionary. And I feel this way, period. Like, I don't agree with the Proud Boys. I don't agree with the right. I don't agree with the conservatives. I don't be at their rallies. I don't be at their protests. I don't show up for those reasons. So whatever, how you choose to go to a protest that is your organized protest or the beliefs that you espouse, which you're supporting, you're a part of that protest, is an entirely different thing from attending a protest for the purposes of being in opposition. So whether you have a gun, don't have a gun, that's how I see that differently.
Didn't Black Panthers and stuff used to roll up strapped? I mean, the whole reason why California has such strict gun laws is because Republicans got mad at the Black Panthers who were rolling up everywhere strapped and dignified,
how they
and
felt
well
with that?
trained. I'm sorry?
But that's my thing. Whenever we use these black scenarios and we use as a black person example, it'd be handled differently. In a scenario where these are black people, the entire discourse, the response to it is going to be different. They're not going to need no comment from me. They don't need me to be sympathetic because they're going to respond to it differently.
I know, but I'm trying to come up with a standard that anticipates that one day the roles will be flipped. And I'm doing that to check myself to make sure that I'm not being ideologically driven. Dinesh D'Souza, which I know, big booze, thumbs down, tweeted, the left's common refrain is, quote, "We can't have vigilante justice. But when the thugs are looting, rioting, and marauding, and the cops are nowhere to be seen, what other kind of justice is there?" I know.
The cops were there, by the way.
Well,
and it's the cops' conduct that we protest in.
But I was thinking to myself, Kyle Rittenhouse, I believe, is a vigilante. Mm-hmm. I also believe that on some level, protesting, some of which is was property destruction and cars being burnt and quote unquote looting,
Yeah.
is also a response to feeling like society isn't doing their job. Cops aren't doing their job with respect to James Blake. And people are taking things into their own hands, which is another kind of vigilantism.
Yeah.
Now, ideologically, I feel different about.
I don't consider.
It, right?
I don't consider it vigilantism.
I think there's a significant difference between obviously property destruction and taking of a human life, and I cannot emphasize that enough. Those are not the same things. Those are not equivalent things. However, in the abstraction of, I don't think I want to completely just wave away the notion that there are two groups of people here who feel like, for very different reasons, they got to take things into their own hands, right?
It just isn't comparable. There's this desire to, and I know you're not saying there is, but there's this desire to like add merit and legitimacy into like what the right is doing or what they say or what those perspectives are, because these are, but for me, I just can't be a part of that song and dance, right? At least not, especially not in this kind of scenario. It can't, like, let's just, like, for me, it comes down to this. This is the scenario, right? Jacob Blake is shot 14 times, right? He's shot on video, paralyzed. And as far as we know, at one point fighting for his life, he's paralyzed now. But at the time, everyone thinks he's going to be dead, right? This is international news. That's what's happening. This is now on the heels of George Floyd's death, of Rayshard Brooks' death, and multiple deaths, right? Like just people being routinely killed by the police. So the frustration that is felt by people and community members, Black people and people who are aligned with them, at being murdered by their police state every single day, and going out and getting frustrated and say, you know what, in my response to my extreme frustration with the legitimization of having my lives taken by police, I'm going to damage property and yada, yada, yada. And the people who have no dog in that fight, they're not the ones they're not upset about the lives being taken. They're not upset about Jacob Blake being taken, or, the previous problem of Black people being killed by the police. That does not upset them. What they're upset about is the idea that the people that are upset about the fact that someone they actually know was shot 14 times, may damage a building, a shop they've never been to, they've never seen, just the very idea that property is more important, or that is what riles me up. I'm sorry, I can't legitimize that as being with merit. I understand their point. You're concerned for property. I think in and of itself, if your concern is in property, when you're hearing about a story about somebody being shot and killed by the police, that tells me everything I know about you on a moral level. And so I just can't engage it. I get where you're coming from, but I just don't think it's with merit. I think a lot of what's happening on the right is just racism.
But it's not the equivalence between those two things, or the motive to want to go protect a car dealership. Like, also, of all things, like, who truly cares about the profit margin?
And imagine that. Imagine you yourself can't drive. Imagine you yourself need somebody. No, we do that. You yourself. No, we didn't. You can't even drive. We don't know whether it's his mom or his friend to drive him across the state, but it wasn't him. He hadn't even got no car. Why?
Look, I'm gonna have to stand up for non-drivers here in a second. No, but look. I guess what I'm getting at is, in a world where, I know this isn't fair. I'm not trying to. It's hard, right? I don't want to say in a world where nobody was killed, because that's like. Yeah. The whole point is that many people were killed.
Yes.
And all of whom were people on our quote unquote side. But in a world where Rittenhouse wasn't there that night and nobody died, right? Because the only people who died that night, for all of the talk about the protesting and the looting and the burning and the stuff, the only people who died that night were killed by Kyle Rittenhouse.
You better say that. Continue.
Okay. But in a world where Kyle didn't show up and therefore nobody died that night, there would still be a conversation, as there was the whole summer, about the moral merit of property damage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think that conversation is a bunch of bullshit. I just don't think that conversation is born out of every single time there are protests, every time police are killed, anytime anybody protests against police brutality, the conversation changes to having an issue with the form of protest. Every single time, even in New York City where there's no property damage, I went to all of the protests, right? I was at protests all summer like it was my job. And it's just peaceful walking. It is the same level of hysteria, anger at the fact that people are even doing it. I was at a protest legally observant, just so standing out on the outskirts, right? Just like taking notes, and walks up some white guy that's like a bellhop for some place in Manhattan. And he's just looking at them in the corner upset. He's just like, People are just walking. They're just like stupid shit. You know what I mean? Just hot, heated. Because what it really boils down is you're not sympathetic to the cause. You don't care. You don't like the fact that they're resisting that. It doesn't matter whether or not they were damaging property or not, because they will recharacterize it that way. Even when that's not the case, even those guys, you know, the two goofy lawyers, the ones with the guns in the picture from last summer, them. Cool. They were just on the news today because they showed up. They traveled to the
husband and wife pair that was in front of their like mansion pointing guns at protesters. They caught a charge, right?
Yes, they caught a misdemeanor charge and the governor pardoned them.
Right.
They pled guilty and they were pardoned, and now the guy is running for Senate. Right. And or something. But anyway, they're up there. They're up there now in front of the cameras, framing that incident that we all know, we know what it is now people were at the house in front of them threatening to rape his wife. Were they? Were they doing that? Were they doing that? No. That's what they did. Like, okay, bro. They changed the narrative. They just make it that. It does not matter how peaceful you go about it. They will come up with, actually, because they're not just going to come out and call a spade a spade. Say you don't give a damn. That'd be an easier song and dance. Just say that. Say you don't care. You know, you support police, law enforcement. You think they have the right to use whatever violence. Then we can have a conversation on those honest merits. But this idea that it's about the property and all this hubbubaloo nonsense, no. It's a bunch of foolishness. I just don't buy it. So I get it. I get where you're coming from if it were an argument with merit, but I just don't think it is. I just don't believe it is.
I guess what I'm trying to come up to is why I think it's morally justified. I'm just trying to put into words why I think a certain kind of taking into your own hands vigilantism with respect to property damage is okay.
Yeah.
As the language of the unheard or whatever.
Yeah.
And, you know, something short of killing, but a kind of patrolling around with guns, vigilantism for what they believe in is kind of de facto inappropriate. And maybe we wouldn't think, maybe we think that's fine as long as they didn't kill somebody.
I mean, listen, I think they're just, I mean, one is for a cause and one is just in opposition to a cause.
They think it's a cause. I mean, like, obviously, I disagree with their cause. But you have to
ignore. But it isn't though. If I don't have a belief, like my belief doesn't exist. My problem, my claim doesn't exist unless yours exists. And I have an issue with they don't just have it in a vacuum. They're not just worried about the property and the street just by itself. No, it's literally a reaction. Like, think about it this way. I'm not on the right. You know what I mean? Whatever the issues are, whatever they believe, you know, have at it. I don't agree, whatever, but I'm not like, come Raheem, let's go Raheem, let's tell them how upset we are. We gonna roll the streets. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's my cause. No, it's different.
The listeners, Raheem is Ole's internet famous cat.
That's what I'm saying. Like, there's a difference. They don't just, that's not just, you know, being pro, like, even if I don't agree with it, being pro-life is a belief, right? That's a belief system. That's its own belief system that can stand whether or not, you know, someone's pro-choice, you could go be advocating for that. That's a law. That's something you believe in. Here, that's not the case. This isn't a belief. This isn't his, you know, he was out there because he has some belief or he has something. No, he just don't like that other people you don't like their belief. You don't like what they're arguing. You don't like what they're doing. You don't like it in so much that you traveled to come be there. So it's just not the same. They're not the same.
I do think it's reactionary.
You know, but I think Proud Boys can have their rallies. It would be different if you see me saying the Proud Boys can't go run on and blah, blah, blah. That'd be different. But they do, and I don't have any problem with it. I mean, I don't agree with them. I think whatever, but I think they have their rights. All the anti-vaxxers been protesting, rallying all year, making all kind of noise about the nonsense they believe in. I think it's stupid, but I let them rock. I don't say nothing about it.
Well, what about if the Proud Boys have a rally in a urban area with, you know, vulnerable people, you know, downtown, mixed race, Black and brown neighborhood. And some Antifas show up to say, we're just here to keep the peace and make sure that nobody here gets hurt. And they're standing around with guns, the way it happens times.
Antifa? Well, child, listen, I can't be a part of people's craziness. But
that's the thing. Like, I don't think it's an accident that everyone involved in the scenario is white. Every single person in the scenario is white.
Briahna, I was just about to say that because I was about to say at the end of the day, here's the real honest thing. If the Proud Boys were carrying on and they went to go a black neighborhood or whatever to go do something like that, all the black people would go inside. You know what I mean? But no, that's just the truth. It's just the truth. It's just the truth. So often you see like, you know, there is another conversation, another day to be had, but me and my friend have this off the time, but there is a lot to be said about what white allies do within a movement. You know what I mean? How they go about their advocacy and how it gets placed on, you know, the community that they're advocating for. Because at the end of the day, that's just not the approach that black people would take about it. That's how come I said from the beginning, it was like, we wouldn't be there, we wouldn't do that or whatever. It would be some white people doing that. Even if they were allies, would be white people doing that. And I don't get in white people business. Generally, like so that would be my position.
That might have to be the name of the episode, White People Business.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm trying to debate whether or not I want to make you angry by playing this one clip for you, because I do think it foregrounds the extent to which, however this comes out, I think one of the biggest frustrations people are going to have is the hypocrisy of the right, who suddenly don't care about lawful gun ownership with the gun owner is black, who suddenly don't care about, you know, bad gun handling behavior and underage people having guns and stuff if the person is white and politically aligned, who champion someone who takes down an active shooter when it's on all this. I was listening to Mark Garagos and Adam Carolla from The Man Show, Jimmy Kimmel's old co-host before Jimmy Kimmel went straight, have a podcast. Mark Garagos is a famous defense attorney who's defended like Winona Ryder and Michael Jackson and all of these celebrities. He came to speak to us one day in law school, and for a hot second I was like, oh, this is what I want to do.
Oh yeah.
It's like very like sexy and kind of like fun and dramatic seeming when you're, and like obviously very lucrative when you do it on what he's doing.
Right.
But I was listening to this podcast because Mark Garagos is, you know, knowledgeable. And I wanted to get a sense of what the conservative arguments being made were. And this was a little like screed from Adam Carolla at the end that had set my hair on flame.
My last thought's a philosophical thought, which is we have an interesting relationship with danger or risk, which is we've all gone insane over the last year and a half with COVID. But if there's a guy with an AR-15 who just shot somebody, we'll still chase him and try to wrestle away his gun, which seems imminently more dangerous than COVID, at least if you're young and healthy and able to pursue somebody on foot with that kind of vigor. I am shocked that, A, he's got this AR-15 and you, without a weapon, are chasing him and trying to corner him behind a car, number one. But once he shoots that guy, I think we've established that he will use his AR-15 and knows how to use his AR-15. Why are we chasing him at that point? I mean, guys running up, just smacking him on the head, another guy, you know, whacking him with it. You have a skateboard. He has an AR-15. Why don't you pump the brake? Pump the brake a little bit there.
You know, I'm not mad at that. I'm not even mad at that stupidness. You know why? Because at the end of the day, all you're doing is explaining why it's not self-defense. That's what you're saying. That's what you're saying. Oh, this, like, even by how he framed it, it's like, you would go after the guy with the AR-15. You know why you're saying it like that? Because the guy with the AR-15 is the dangerous one in this situation, right? Oh, okay, word. So you said, oh, he shot him, so he's demonstrated that he'll use it, and then he'll use it again, and he did, right? So not self-defense. I rest my case.
Well, thank you, counselor. Oh, boy. I did not expect to laugh as much as I did during this episode, I gotta say. But you are always such a delight. Thank you so much for your analysis. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for being the lawyer I can never be. Can you please tell our audience where they can find you on TV, on the internet, wherever you are?
You can find me on Twitter and all socials at Miss Olurin. That's MSOLURIN. And you can find me on the Law and Crime Network twice a week.
Thank you so much. Please take care of yourself. We need you out here. I hope to have you back very soon for all kinds of colorful analysis. I'm just going to be coming up with things for you to comment on because I find you to be so deeply entertaining. Thank you so much. And to our audience, as always, keep the faith. Hey, YouTube. Thanks for watching. Just a reminder that this is a podcast. You can catch an extra premium episode every Monday for $5 a month at patreon.com/badfaithpodcast. That's patreon.com/badfaithpodcast for $5 a month, an extra episode every week. Additionally, please do consider liking this video, subscribing to this channel. It helps us out. It helps independent media beat the algorithm. We appreciate you. And as always, keep the faith.